How about now? We good? We good? I think we're good. Hopefully that we're good now, but yeah. Thank you guys for telling me. But yeah, every time I reset my PC, for some reason, it just likes to be stupid. Why won't this show live chat? I'm trying to bring up chat on like my other monitor, and it's just not doing it, and it's very frustrating. Okay, well, this is just not working how I wanted it to, so we'll just say screw that. All right. Let me look at it. Hi, Robert. I can't make it to the chat. I have a topic. Discuss, please. Frey Civil War. There are a lot of interesting angles. Vale coming to the Riverlands. Walder dying. Yeah. I mean, I think the big part of it is, like, the Freys as of right now are already extremely weak, right? Given that they're very divided, they're getting picked off by the Brotherhood Without Banners, so yeah, I think that's going to have very big implications, especially when you look at that division when it comes to Sansa trying to reclaim the Riverlands. You know, we have the Blackfish still as a player out there, Stoneheart. So yeah, very, very important. Hi, Jesse, by the way. Hi, Mar. Hi, Durian. Thank you guys for telling me I had no sound. Hi, Advocate. How are you? I'm doing all right. Really busy time, especially for the channel, and just me personally, with school and stuff. I'm on like a week break for Thanksgiving, and in that week I have to get a lot done. Because I'm going to be daily uploading for a Christmas event again in December, I have to like start bulk recording now so that I can start editing and stuff as those come out. So what's really interesting is going to be like, the beginning of that series is going to be recorded like this week. So I'm just trying to get that done, and all of that. Hi, Mystery. How are you? Hi, Avery. Thank you. I put that up right before the stream. If you guys saw the Instagram post, yeah, I did that. I also put up like right there. That used to be my cat's old stocking that we used to put stuff in. So, you know. Where do you think House of the Dragon Season 2 will end? I'm not actually sure, because I know people that have read spoilers have said it's not where you think. My guess would probably just be the Battle of the Gullet. Okay, so let me get further into, let me just say where we're going to go with this stream, because I do have a format in which I'm going to go with it. I'm probably not going to, once I like start getting into the topics, I'm not going to answer as many questions or side stuff unless it's like actually about what I'm talking about. Just because I'm going to be using these streams to probably like make into videos later, just to help me so that I'm not repeating the same stuff over and over again. But yeah, so we're going to tackle in this stream, I don't know how much we're going to get through, but I want to talk about the Pink Letter. So if you guys have Pink Letter stuff, let me know. So we're going to be doing the Pink Letter. We're going to be doing, what was the other one I want to do? Oh, how does Stannis take Winterfell? So like the battle for Winterfell. And then the last one, if we get to it, we're going to talk about Robb's will a little bit. I did all those in this stream because they're more connected. And so my goal is more or less to hopefully I can take this stream and then edit it down into one of those episodes that I'm going to be doing. But yeah. I do not think Winterfell will be completely destroyed, by the way, Mar. Do what you gotta do, Grease. I'm happy just listening to it. Love to see it. Love to see it. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think season 2 will end with Rhaenyra taking King's Landing. That's a good one. Does the Blackfish make it out of Winds? I hope he serves more of a purpose than he did in the show. I think so, yeah. Also, yeah, trying, Haley. Interesting, Philip. I've never heard of that theory before. I don't know how I feel about it, though, because I don't know how young Griff having, or not young Griff, Dany having the 3 eggs frame her as a Blackfire. Okay, so I see your okay. I don't know. I don't really agree on that, but I kind of see where you're coming from. Makes sense, Jesse. All right. I'm gonna answer yours, Knight, and then we're gonna get into the topics. What do you think are who do you think are the 3 heads of the dragon? If I had to guess, probably young Griff, Dany, and Jon. All right. So moving forward from here on, I'm going to try to keep on topic. So if I don't answer your question, just keep it there. We might get to it at a different time, but I will be focusing on specifically like the pink letter for now. So let's talk about the pink letter. There's a couple options for who people think wrote it. The major ones are usually like Ramsay, Mance, or Stannis. Those are kind of the main three, given that Stannis would have need of a wildling army of Jon, again, because we already know that he had the plan of wanting to make Jon Lord Stark, more or less, to again rally the North behind him, because Stannis kind of found out, you need a Stark to get the support of the North. The North is not going to really fully back an outsider like Stannis. They will support him when it comes to, getting the Boltons out of power to a degree. That's a different circumstance. But having Jon makes a lot of sense. And so Stannis could have faked this letter. Again, when you look at, we also have to think about who had the ability to write this letter, having like Ramsay's dialogue, his language. So that's another like little part of this. And so if you're going to go argue from the Stannis point of view, it's going to be, he has Theon, right? Theon would have that information. He would know how Ramsay would write this letter. He can do all those things. The problem with this theory and this person being it is that Stannis doesn't particularly strike me as this kind of person, as just a straight up like liar, manipulating things. Like Stannis is a lot of things, but he's not really that, in my opinion. Yes, Stannis can be somewhat politically savvy, but to a degree like that, I don't think that adds up to his actual character arc. Maybe you guys are different on that. I think of the three, the major ones, I think this is the weakest of the three. I know there's a lot of debate between Ramsay and Mance, so we'll get to those like afterwards, because I think personally, Stannis, it seems like, has all the motivation to, but doesn't really have all the character working to do so, right? Because the other part of this, the other part of we didn't even discuss, is like if Stannis is dead, well that changes a lot, right? And we also have like this foreshadowing where he's like to Justin Massey, he's like, you may hear that I'm dead, but you got to get those swords regardless, that type of thing. And so that would again still serve Stannis's like cause. So again, all the motivation is there for Stannis, all of the like plot is there, but the actual character itself doesn't really seem to add up to this arc. And that's my one big like complaint with Stannis being this type of person. So let's move on to Mance. Now Mance again would have all the reasons to send this letter to Jon once again. And also when you look at the idea of, Jon would need to come to save Mance or whatnot, right? And so bringing, again, the wildlings, that would bring back Mance's people. That makes a lot of sense. You could, again, take over Winterfell. And also, Mance could also see this as an opportunity, seeing that Stannis seems like he's losing, right? From the outside looking in, right? Mance doesn't really know exactly what's going on with Stannis' case. It could be one of those things where Mance just sees what's going on from the Bolton point of view, because that's where he's been at in Winterfell. And so that could make a lot of sense as well. I don't also have the most background on the Mance reasoning compared to Stannis and Ramsay. So let me know, guys, in the chat, like, what do you think is, if you think there's somebody else besides the three I named, what do you think is the reasoning for why it would be a certain person? The Advocate seems Ramsay, no question. I'm kind of on that board. We'll get to that one in a second. Andrew thinks it's Mance. Who do you think wrote the pink letter? Personally, I think it was Ramsay. I think for me, this is going to get into the Battle of Winterfell, and it's the reason I wanted to kind of combine those two in the stream, because I think they are very interwoven, I guess is how we would say. But yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. So Matthew, we'll talk about that a little bit in the next part of the stream, but I think, I think he will die in a battle with the others. The only name mentioned in the letter is Mance Rayder, and the letter refers to the Night's Watch as Black Crows. That's a great point. So that's another point I forgot to point out. It's like, so if Stannis wrote this or Ramsay wrote this, why use the language of the Black Crows. It's not something that you would think Stannis or Ramsay would refer to them as. So again, I think that's some really good evidence as well. So yeah, I think a great point there, Ander. Audio too loud? Okay, hold on. Okay. Is that better? I turned it down a little bit. Is that good? Perfect. Okay, cool. Did you think Jon's decision was out of character, and why did he have to go himself? I don't think it was out of character, given that we know like how much Jon cares about Arya. We know, and again, you also have to think about like Jon is someone that was already didn't like the Boltons, and when this was like a personal attack, I think Jon would be seeing this as, okay, the Boltons are gonna come to like kill us. Like they finally have had enough of our shit. Like Jon, I think, realizes he has to deal with the problem. Read the pink letter. Okay, if I can find the actual text of the pink letter, I will read that to you guys. Hopefully it's on the wiki. Okay. So here we go. This is the actual full letter that's on the wiki of Ice and Fire. Your false king is dead, bastard. He and all his host were smashed in 7 days of battle. I have his magic sword. Tell his red whore. Your false king's friends are dead, their heads upon the walls of Winterfell. Come see them, bastard. Your false king lied, and so did you. You told the world you burned the king beyond the wall, and instead you sent him to Winterfell to steal my bride from me. I will have my bride back. If you want Mance Rayder back, come and get him. I have him in a cage for all the north to see. Proof of your lies. The cage is cold, but I have made him a warm cloak from the skins of the 6 whores who came with him to Winterfell. I want my bride back. I want the false king's queen. I want his daughter and his red witch. I want this wildling princess. I want his little prince, the wildling babe. And I want my reek. Send them to me, bastard, and I will not trouble you or your black crows. Keep them from me, and I will cut out your bastard's heart and eat it. Ramsay Bolton, the true-born lord of Winterfell. So, after that, I think there's some interesting lines here to study. So let's kind of go through this a little bit. I think one of the most interesting parts about this is how would so if this is Ramsay or Stannis. So if it's Stannis, we have to make the jump in logic here that Stannis actually knows that this is Mance. Now, is that because Stannis was in on Mance not actually being burned? Possibly. Maybe he figured it out. Maybe it's something where he just realized what was going on and it was a little too fishy. I don't know. I still don't think it adds up to Stannis, right? I think Stannis, of all the three, does make sense. Now, if we look at this from Mance's point of view, there is a lot of emphasis here put on Mance. And I think if you are someone that's going with that this is Ramsay that wrote it, you do have to question, why is there so much emphasis on Mance in the wildlings as a whole, right? Like, not a lot of this is really actually about even Stannis, right? It's like the first part of it is, right? Like the first, like, what, three or four sentences? It makes sense, I guess. The other part of this would be, so did Ramsay torture it out of Mance? But the other part of this that I find interesting is the hosts smashed together for 7 days of battle. Well, that doesn't seem to make any sense, because if we know if Stannis is going to die, it's not going to be 7 days of battle. It's going to be like one battle and Stannis loses. If that's the case, and that's actually what happens, okay, well, maybe we're just forward in the timeline, which is what I think we are, right? I do think that is the case. 7 days of battle. Why would Ramsay lie about how long the battle took? Because if we're meant to think about this as in, okay, Stannis wins the initial battle, and then maybe he's sieging for 6 days. It doesn't really seem to make sense. And so some of this other part of this, it just seems interesting. Like, the language is obviously sounds a lot like Ramsay for the most part. And so it would have to be someone that has been around Ramsay long enough to know how he would write this. Now, I don't know. I think there is a lot to say that Mance could be in charge of this. Let me see what you guys are saying in here. Makes sense, Jesse. Okay. What if Ramsay hunted people north of the wall? Seems easier to get away with. That's very possible. I had something that the Manderleys had something to do with the letter. Don't know the correlation, but that's a theory that's out there. I think it was Mance personally. I don't know how the Manderleys would know all of this information, right? That would be my biggest issue with the Manderleys. I saw a theory that it was Barbary Dustin. Again, but my problem with a lot of these characters like Barbary Dustin, like the Manderleys, how do they know all this information? Like, how do they know that Mance is still alive? How do they know all these things? I'm not sure. Mel theory seems even less likely to me personally, but I think, see, Mel, I do believe has the motive because she wants to get Jon and the Wildlings to help Stannis. But I just don't, how would she know? Again, she is magical, so it's possible that she maybe has seen how Ramsay acts. How does she know the language? I still believe that Ramsay wrote it, but it was modified by several people, perhaps, or by the Maester. That could be possible. Not completely on top of it, is it Ramsay? You can taste the insecurity in the letter by him calling Jon bastard so many times. I think that's a great point, right? Like, that seems like a lot of Ramsay's speech. And the question is, like, the big, I think, thing that we have to look at whether this is Mance or whether this is someone like Ramsay is how well does Mance know Ramsay? Because, again, this seems very accurate to the way Ramsay speaks. My biggest problem is, why are there certain things in this letter that seem obviously false? What's the reasoning there? Like, why say 7 days of battle? We know that's not true. That we know that's not going to be true. So what's the point there? That would be my biggest question to you guys as viewers. There's a little tongue-in-cheek humor if Stannis knows about Mance and also Jane Poole. You burned a fake Mance. Here's your fakes. That's true. That's true. Pink letter is ironic because Mance wrote it and Mance. Oh God, don't even start. Don't even start. Well, hello. I'm not sure how to say your name, so I'm gonna say Addo because I'm not even gonna try. Yes, so the ink is like a pinkish like ink that is supposed to be, I think, the Bolton's like actual seal is on it, but it's broken or something like that. Yes, Mance is still in Winterfell, Ander. Like he is still there. Or okay, I guess it's not confirmed, but I would assume he's still there. Do you think this many books or this many theaters will harm the book because with many shots are going to be many hit? I mean, I think the expectations people have for the books because it's taken so long for it to come out will definitely like hurt it a little. Yeah, see, Jesse, that's my thing, right? I think Mance does have the means to be able to make this letter, and I think, you know, that would check out, right? Like, for me personally, like, I am someone that I lean towards this being Ramsay, but I think there's a lot of interesting evidence towards it being Mance. I don't remember Jack, honestly. But see, my question is, like, if it was the Castle Black mutineers that were writing the letter, right? How do they know all this information? Like, how do they know everything going on at Winterfell? How do they know, like, Mance is still alive? Like, how do they know all these things? That seems very, like, implausible to me. Because Mel wouldn't tell these people that. Like, that doesn't, I don't think that makes any sense. So, I don't know. But, like, let's get into, like, Ramsay. So, again, this is just the kind of this is more like the basic theory, just taking it at face value. And I think the arguments for this one is going to be, he is trying to get a rise out of Jon. Now, we know Ramsay is not the most politically savvy, right? He's more politically savvy than, say, someone like Joffrey, but he's not a Roose Bolton, right? And so at this point, I think it is someone that he's trying to get rid of, someone that has Stark blood, someone that the North could rally around. I think he, if this is true, it's one of those things where there are truths in here, but there's also falses. Like, again, the truth could be, what does Ramsay know at this point? It could be one of those situations where Stannis does fake his death so that Ramsay actually does believe that Stannis is dead, right? So a lot of this stuff in Ramsay's head could be true. Stannis is dead. He has his magic sword. The False King's friends, some of these people are dead. All of that stuff could be true. Maybe he ends up figuring out Mance again because of the women helping Theon escape. Maybe Mance is captured, and that, again, he figures it all out, right? He finds the thing hiding Mance's identity, and then, he can kind of maybe put some of this together. So some of this, again, could be truth. Some of it could be lies. Some of it could be things to extraly make Jon angry. Calling Jon a bastard, right? Those things make a lot of sense. Like, attacking the innocents, right? We know that Jon is someone that is very honorable. He's like Ned. Ramsay would know that. So all that stuff, I think, makes sense from that perspective, right? And so I think Ramsay, especially if you look at the situation right now, where in Ramsay's mind, Stannis is defeated. Okay, well, let's just take out the rest of our issues and then the North is secure. I think that's the way Ramsay could be seeing this. Now, the other part of this that's interesting is that it says Trueborn Lord of Winterfell at the end. That implies that Roose is dead, right? Like, if we read into that, if Ramsay is saying that he is the Lord of Winterfell, that means his father's out of the way. So, is that also a lie, or does Ramsay kill his father? There's a lot of things in here that are just question marks, right? There's things we just do not know. And so to me, that's very interesting, right? Is that, like, why write the Trueborn Lord of Winterfell? And so even if you think this is Mance, this is another interesting question. Why does Mance write that? Unless Roose is dead, or maybe Mance is just making Ramsay be the major figurehead against Jon. I don't know. Like, why is that a thing? Metal, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, heads on spikes does not seem to be the Bolton method. I think that's a great point. I agree, Casper. Mar, I could definitely see this. Maybe this is some Maester intervention, right? That could be very plausible as well. The real question is, will we actually learn who wrote the letter? I think we never will. So I actually do think we possibly will. Now, the problem is going to be here. Who is alive by the time Jon comes south? Because, again, you have to remember, if it is Mance, if it is Ramsay, right? If it is one of those two, if Ramsay dies before interacting with anyone who have actually seen the letter, he's not going to randomly just blurt out, "Oh, I sent a letter to Jon saying you guys are all dead" and stuff. Like, that doesn't sound natural dialogue, right? So if Ramsay is already dead by the time that Jon gets here, then that's not going to happen. So the other question is, okay, Mance. So Mance, at this point when he wrote the letter, could not have been captured or whatever, and then he actually could have. So if Mance is still alive, then that means quite a lot, right? Because then maybe he would be able to tell Jon, "Oh yeah, I wrote this letter," or maybe I didn't. Maybe that's something he just doesn't say. And so I think there is a lot of reason that we may never find that out in the story. There might be a mystery just left up to our imagination. But yes, Drew, a perfect one. Perfect time to watch. I had not heard that, Clifford, but that is pretty cool. I like the idea that Stannis beats the Freys as in the Night Lamp theory and allies with the Mannerleys who take Lightbringer to Roose and Ramsay and continue to feign lords. Yeah, I like that idea. And I talked a lot about kind of the northern like politics and stuff with Stannis specifically quite a lot today because I did recorded some videos for next month. But yeah, I agree. That could be a great point as well, Durian. But like my thing is, at the time of like Roose being there, technically he is the Lord of Winterfell, right? So I don't know. Oh, I agree, Mar. Don't worry, I agree. Drew, I'd be curious, what plot lines did you not like the most? Like, which ones did you like? Which ones did you not like? All right. So again, I think just to wrap up the pink letter discussion, I think there's a lot of question marks here that George has left open to us on to kind of the interpretation of events of what could happen in the future. Like, is this George really just telling us more or less what's going to happen through Ramsay's point of view or Mance's point of view? I think so. I think a lot of merits are for Mance and for Ramsay, and I think Stannis just doesn't really make sense to me. I think a lot of the other ones outside of Mance and Ramsay just don't hold a lot of water, in my opinion. But that'll kind of get us into it's a nice transition into the next part of this. So the next part of this is like, okay, so let's go ahead and say that the Night Lamp theory is, for the most part, correct. Let's say that Stannis ends up beating the Freys. But let's say, again, I am someone that thinks that he's going to fake his death. There's been a lot of foreshadowing to that, right? When Stannis even saying that you might hear that he's dead. And even with, again, the pink letter foreshadowing to those events happening. If we take a look at that, we go, okay, a lot of signs are pointing towards Stannis faking his death. What does that do for the story? And so the Manderleys, I think, in my opinion, I think it makes sense for them to do one of two things at the battle again outside of Winterfell. One, it's going to be to ally with Stannis, help kill the rest of the Frey forces, and just completely flip sides, while still kind of maybe feigning side with Ramsay and Roose. Now, the other thing that I think makes a little bit more sense that I've kind of came around on is that the Manderleys just stay out of it, right? They just don't. They say, oh, the conditions were too bad, we couldn't find them. And that actually makes sense. That is actually a pretty good excuse. The conditions are absolutely horrible. It's going to be extremely difficult to actually find Stannis' camp. They could if they wanted to, probably. But, they have a good reason to be like, oh, we didn't make it. And so that allows, again, the Freys to go in by themselves against Stannis. And I think Stannis will take them out and overcome them. So now the Manderleys at this point, knowing that the Freys lost, right? Or they can say, okay, they come back and more or less they're going to be like, oh, yes, Stannis was defeated. Maybe there's a couple of Stannis' soldiers or maybe even a good amount, right? That he has dressed up in the Frey uniforms, their clothing, and they say, oh, look, we have Stannis' sword, we have, his crown, whatever. We took him out. And so that's going to spread, right? We have things like the pink letter, and we'd have going around, the north that Stannis has lost. And all while at this situation, you would now have Ramsay and Roose maybe would become a little bit more laxed about the threat in the north, thinking that their control is more stable. And you have a Trojan horse type situation where Stannis, because he has the Manderleys and some of his own men in the castle, they can open the doors. We could even see something like this where it's just like as simple as you have Theon. Theon has already snuck into Winterfell once and taken the castle. He could teach Stannis how to do that. And so they could just do that, where you send a couple men over the walls, bam, now you have the gates wide open. And so I think there's a lot of things that pointing to, okay, how could Stannis take the castle? I'd be interested to see what your guys' thoughts are. Any other ideas on what you think could happen here? If Roose is the Lord of Winterfell, I mean, I think Roose can actually just claim both, right? Like, he doesn't have to be just the one lord of one of the castles. He can be the lord of both. The obvious answer is George R. R. Martin wrote yes. Do you think Melisandre return against Stannis during this period? No, because I mean, I think for at this time, right? If Stannis is believed to be dead, she can't really turn against him. Like, he'll be dead. Like, she's already turning again. Like, there's nothing really to do, really. Drew Tyrion was rough for me to read, honestly. Some favorites, though, were Davos and the Mannerleys, which is one of my favorite parts of the whole series. Along with all, yeah, I think that's kind of the sentiment of Dance, is like a lot of people really like the northern stuff. And then like maybe bits and pieces of like Tyrion, bits and pieces of Dany, bits and pieces of Jon, you know. But yeah, Andrew, I would agree. Concerning Winterfell, will we figure out who the murderer is? I think we will, and that's another topic we'll talk about in probably another video or stream. But yeah. To this day, I don't understand what seasons mean. They don't have regular seasons. What does a full spring mean? So I think you're talking about like why is the seasonal pattern like mixed up and like why all that happens. But more or less like we just have this cycle, right? Where we go from like a summer to a winter, and it kind of varies on length. And so some things more or less like what basically happens like right before Robert's Rebellion is like this time period where there's a really long like summer and things like that nature, and it does never actually happen. But if you are talking about the year of the false spring, that is like basically this time period where they thought we were gonna be good, and then more or less it goes to winter. Because Robert's Rebellion, kind of the start of it, kind of happens during like winter, when winter is starting. Hi Silence, how are you? Good night, Mar. How are you? Or not? How are you? Good night, Mar. That also is a good scientific explanation, Metal. But yeah, so getting back to Winterfell, and the really interesting part of this, like we just talked about with the pink letter, is like we have some information to kind of back this up, right? Like we have some information that would make sense as to if Ramsay wrote it, he believes Stannis is dead, unless he's just straight up lying, which doesn't seem to make any sense. Like, why would Stannis, or not Stannis, Mance and or Ramsay lie about that? Like, yes, maybe to motivate Jon to be the person to come fix this problem with the Boltons, or to instigate them into a fight, but at the same time, like, if Stannis is dead, like, this news would travel, and if he wasn't dead, well, this wouldn't hold any water, right? Like, Jon on his march kind of more south would realize, okay, wait a minute, it's not actually dead. Like, should I even be coming down here? Am I getting tricked? Like, those are all things that would go through Jon's mind. And so, to me, I think whoever wrote the pink letter actually does believe that Stannis is gone, like that he's dead. And so that's why I think it really plays into the idea, like, if we're going to have this situation in which Stannis is able to take Winterfell, it has to be by trickery, right? Like, I don't think anyone thinks that Stannis is going to siege Winterfell and take it. If he does that, like, and just actively does a siege, no trickery, no tomfoolery, he's going to lose. Like, I genuinely think in that situation he will lose. That's a possibility. I'm still weary. There's no way Roose would let that letter be sent if he knew about it. I agree. Right? That's my thing, is like, I don't think Ramsay made this a public letter if he was the one to send it. You know, Mance definitely could have sent this. He doesn't need Roose's permission. But, like, if Ramsay did this without killing Roose, or if it's just something under the table, it is very interesting. Does Stannis kill Roose and Ramsay, or will that justice be given to Theon or a Stark? I think personally, for the story, I think it makes the most amount of sense to allow Theon to kill Ramsay, or maybe a combination of her, or not him and Jane. But I think Stannis could be the one to kill Roose. Yes. Do you think it was definitely written after? I think that makes the most amount of sense, Ander, given the situation. Um, Silence. I am not sure why Nightbot is spamming your, or is stopping you from typing, but I will attempt to fix that when I get the chance. Can I definitely get your point, but I just personally enjoy talking about it, right? Like, if it never comes out, fair. I mean, I still just like enjoying talking about all these ideas. For me personally, right? I definitely can see why people wouldn't, but to me, I enjoy it. So yeah, I think what results is Stannis ends up taking Winterfell, and because of that, right, we're now in a different situation, right? Because now the Bolton threat's kind of been taken out. I am someone that does not think the Boltons are going to make it to the Dreadfort and like escape. Doesn't make sense narratively for Winds of Winter to me, or the story going forward. Like, the North needs to be somewhat unified at this point. Like, by the ends of Winds of Winter, we cannot have like more civil war at this point. So the next thing is going to be leading to, okay, well, who is going to be one in charge of the North? Whether that's going to be Rickon, whether that's going to be Jon, whether that's going to be a joint region, like group of people, kind of like how we kind of see in the Vale with like the Lord Declarants. Are we going to have that type of situation? We're going to have like a Wyman Manderly, Jon type thing. What's going to go on there? And that's going to be kind of where we're going to go with into the next part of this. So the last like part of this is going to be in the stream is going to be Robb's will, because I think it leads really nicely into this. We'll also have this own little thing about kind of the Northern conspiracy and what's going on there. And this will kind of like hit on pretty much all of the points. But yeah, also my chat is not working. There we go. There it goes. There it goes. Hi, Ghost, by the way. Oh boy, I hope not. I hope not. Do you think Stannis will be around? No, I do not, Josh. I think Jon's parentage will get revealed either at the very end of Winds of Winter or the beginning of Dream, but I don't think so. Matthew, personally, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think Stannis makes it like south is because I just think there's too many claimants at this point. There's too much infighting, right? Again, remember, the whole point is we need to be unified to even have a chance against this threat of the others. And so could you see Stannis, for instance, teaming up with young Griff, who is probably going to be on the throne at this point, Dany, who is also going to be going at the throne at this point? Like, how do we as a collaborative group come together? And I just don't see that happening with Stannis. And so I think a fitting conclusion would be Stannis giving his life for his country, right? For his people. And I think that makes sense, but I don't know. So again, let's talk about this. So Robb's will is very interesting. It's led to a lot of debate. I would, again, after you get out of the stream, or you can go now, I don't really care, but I would really watch History of Westeros' breakdown of Robb's will. They have a very good kind of like video or podcast on it. So it's like over 2 hours. It's fantastic. But the overall broad idea here is, who is Robb, who is the last king of the North, naming as his heir? And that's going to be very important, given like we're in a situation where there's no Stark right now ruling. And so when you have this situation in which Sansa has almost disappeared, right? When you have a situation where Arya is missing, most people think she's dead. A situation where it would appear very few people know that Rickon and Bran are alive, or if any, right? There are a few, right? There's a few. Then you have Jon, who right now is a bastard, but he's on the wall, so he has an oath, right? But how is that going to work? Like, he did die, so does that release him from his oath? And even before his death, he was gonna break his oath anyway, basically. So a lot of questions come out of this, and it's all going to culminate right as the Boltons come down. And so the big question is, where is this will, and who are kind of the important like characters to talk about here? So this is something that I've kind of gone back and forth with, because the Robb's actual will, right? If there was a written document of it, there's only really two possibilities where it could be. One of them is it's in Seaguard, with Lord Mallister, or it's with Galbert Glover and Lady Mormont in the Neck, probably with Howland Reed. And the reason I know, so History of Westeros, they do a counter that it doesn't make sense for the will to go with like Lady Mormont and Galbert Glover because they're going into war. But at the same time, when you look at if there is going to be a reveal of Robb's will, I think it makes the most amount of sense to be in the Neck because that's where the culmination of the story is going. Because you have to think, like, as soon as we reach Howland Reed, it's going to be a whole thing where, once again, Jon's parentage is going to get revealed. And so having Robb's will there also makes sense. Now, the counter argument to that is, do we need a physical will, right? We have two people that know the contents of the will with Howland Reed there. So would you then just go off that? But my point there would be, okay, well, now people can still say we can dispute it, right? Like, it's just two people. They seem very honorable and such, and maybe the North would take a little bit more acceptance of that, but I don't know. I think it makes more sense for them to have the will. And I think you look at those two specifically, they were going into the Neck, a relatively safe area for the Stark supporters. They weren't really going to be involved in the actual main battle. I don't know. But at the same time, I also see why Robb would send his will with Catelyn and Lord Mallister, because you're going to Seaguard, pretty protected castle. It would make sense you put it with Catelyn. But at the same time, does it? Like there's so many things to rationalize with Robb's will, right? Is that at the same time, Catelyn, if we're going off of what I believe and what I think most of the community believes, that Jon was legitimized and or made the heir. You wouldn't want to leave that with Catelyn because Catelyn doesn't really support that. And so Lady Stoneheart's a whole nother part of Robb's will, because where do we go with that, right? Because Lady Stoneheart / Catelyn knows what was on this will, right? And as, again, Josh points out, there are other people. It's just they're not as relevant to the story as of right now. Like people like Jon Umber, Lord Edmure. Those people, they were present and they signed the will, but the problem is, like, they're not as relevant to the story at this point when it comes to Robb's will because they're not up in the North. They're not with that plot. Now, they could by the end. So if you want to make the argument that, yes, you know, you'll have more people than just Lady Mormont, more than Galbert Glover, you'll have Edmure there as well, and Jon Umber, that makes sense, right? You could have a bunch of people, and then maybe the North would just say, okay, that's a lot of respectable people, a lot of, you know, very honorable, honest people that are confirming this. Okay. So that could be a possibility, right? So that's kind of the first part of this, is like, where is the will? I tend to believe it's in the Neck. I think other people tend to believe it's in Seaguard. I think all that makes sense. I think both of those make sense, right? So the next part of this would be then, okay, with that, what is the significance of it, right? And what are people going to do? Why hasn't this, like, come out yet? And one, you look at half the people are either dead or have been captured due to the Red Wedding. Especially when you look at Lord Mallister, he's basically been in his castle this entire time. Okay. You also look at, if the news reaches Howland Reed, well, what's he going to do about it? It's not like they have an army. And what are they going to do if they just pronounce this stuff? The Boltons are going to come over with the phrase and, you know, siege them or try to attack them. Like, there's a perfect moment you have to wait for if you're the faction in the Neck right now. And so that all kind of adds up to this circumstance in which I think makes the most logical sense for Robb's will, is coming in when all of our forces in the North are retreating. And this is why I think the end of Winds, the beginning of Dream makes the most amount of sense, because we're going to find all these characters towards the ending part. And another facet of this that is just another thing is, like, what is Bran going to know, right? Like can Bran also, with his little wizard powers, going to be able to test that, yeah, this is what happened, right? Like with Robb's will, we don't know the extent of what his powers work. Does he have to be around a tree, or had a tree have to be around to see it, which probably had to? Does Bran know anything about Jon's like parentage? So there's a lot of questions that we're gonna have about that, and so that all adds up. And so I think we get to this point where the Robb's will is kind of seen as just something else to justify why Jon becomes the leader of the Northern Coalition. Because Jon isn't necessarily going to need the will to legitimize him if, like, Rhaegar and Lyanna actually were legit. Because then it would be like, okay, he's a legit son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. Right? Again, that's assuming that they married or did something, right? If that doesn't happen and that he just is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, then Robb's will actually means a lot more. Like, legitimizing him to an actual full-blooded Stark is actually quite significant. And so you have a lot of these things culminate, and then you also have the idea that Howland Reed is going to be able to tell who the parents are. So I think a lot of that culminates really well with Robb's will. Other things that are going to be interesting here is, like, what does Stoneheart think about Robb's will? Right? Like, what does she think about it? Because if this is what Robb said and that's what he wrote down, you would maybe think that Stoneheart would honor her son's last wishes. But also, this isn't like Catelyn anymore. Like, this is something entirely different. And some of the other parts of this that become even more sketchy is that Robb wrote this, given that Rickon and Bran were dead, Arya was probably dead, and Sansa was married to Tyrion. Well, okay. Is there a clause in there where it says if one of these other people are found, they come next? Maybe, but maybe there's a clause in there where it's like, okay, if Bran or Rickon's found, they're the Lord, but they need somebody over them because of how young they are. Like, there's a lot of things in there that are just interesting that we just do not know yet. And so I would speculate that Stoneheart, given the situation, would maybe honor Robb, but here's the thing, right? We also know that Lady Stoneheart is finding out that Arya is alive, right? Like she's been looking for Arya. So given that she initially, counters that we don't know that Arya is dead to Robb, and maybe to just name Arya, maybe she tries to crown Arya. And that Arya sees this and says, this is not what I want, right? Her whole arc is not, she doesn't want to be a lady. She doesn't want to be, lord of a castle or one of those things, right? And so it could be her in this, again, how I've theorized, and we'll talk about this and the Revenge Red Wedding stuff that we'll be talking about later on, is that maybe she's the one that gets the crown from Lady Stoneheart and fills out what Robb's initial will was. Maybe Arya finds that out from Stoneheart, and that she is the one to deliver the crown to Jon. Maybe that's like her main reason for going north, instead of just having it between, killing Cersei, for instance, and, going back and seeing her brother Jon. Maybe it's because she also has some purpose to go north, right? To deliver the crown. Like, that's another little wrinkle that you can kind of throw in there about Robb's will. I think Robb's will is one of the most interesting things about Winds of Winter. Like, how is it going to factor in? But yeah, let me look at a chat a little bit. Does Robb's will making Jon a Stark and Lord of Winterfell override the claim his possible children with Jane Westerling has, assuming you believe she is pregnant in the Winds prologue? So that's an interesting point, right? Because I would assume that Robb was actually putting off making this will because of that exact reason, right? Robb wanted Jane to get pregnant, right? So that maybe he didn't actually have to write this will, right? Or even given that situation, he could put in a clause, right? Any of those children with Jane, they would come first. But the big problem here is that Robb at this point doesn't believe that Jane is pregnant, or Jane has at least not told him that she is pregnant. And the other big part of this is, like, Jane gets left at Riverrun, right? But Robb was not going to come back to Riverrun to see her again, right? So he was going back up to the Reclaim the North. So at this point, I would assume that Robb in this will has nothing about his future children with Jane. Because at this point, I don't think he believed that he had any children with her. So I think that's actually very relevant. That makes it's a good point to bring up, Jack. John Umber will be freed after the what? Yeah, I agree. I think the big question will be like, will he be at the neck when all this all goes down? Like, because he could add his voice to that signing as well. I've heard that theory, Josh. I don't particularly like it. I think it's makes more sense for Stoneheart to kind of wipe out the twins and all of that, and for the Riverland plot to resolve itself, not the Vale, in my opinion. That's another thing like that Jesse points out. Like, it's gonna take a while for the Vale to mobilize, right? Like, not only like to do all the politics, right, of like concluding the Vale plot, but to also get them moving, it's gonna take like quite a bit. Like, I don't know. I think the importance of the will is going to be symbolic to Jon to make him want to fight again after coming back from death. I mean, I think that's definitely possible. Like this is the thing, right? If Robb names Jon his heir, I think Jon will accept it much more than he would from someone like, for instance, Stannis offering him, right? Because the difference there is like Robb is wanting him to take on the responsibility of ruling the North. And that's something that a brother is asking a brother, whereas Stannis had a lot of conditions, you know? And so I do think that that's also another good point. Like, I think at this point, Jon is going to be struggling with figuring out what his purpose is, right? And I think that's going to be another thing. Is like Jon himself, I don't think is going to want to be Lord of Winterfell. He just got done being named Lord Commander, and his own men killed him because of it. So I think he's going to need that extra push from something to want to be king of the North and the Riverlands or whatever. That's another thing, right? We didn't even talk about. Like, you would have to assume that Robb also made it to where it's not just the North, it's also the Riverlands as well, given that some of the witnesses are from the Riverlands, right? Edmure apparently signed this will. Lord Mallister apparently signed this will. So that's a lot of power that Jon is going to wield. And something that I find very fascinating kind of about Robb's will is like the debate of should Robb have made Jon the heir? Because in a lot of ways, right, Catelyn is right, but she's wrong because she doesn't really understand. Like, she is doing it from a clear bias. We know she's actually right, but not because of the information she knows. As readers, we know that Arya is still alive. We know that Bran and Rickon are still alive. Catelyn does not know that information, right? And so the big point of that is like, okay, Catelyn is basically doing this out of hatred for Jon, and she's being very emotional. Whereas Robb is looking at this like clearly. Robb is looking at this going, who do I give this to, right? And Catelyn even like brings up a cousin in the Vale, which is just like, you want a cousin that I've never met, that has never been in the North, to rule the North. How do I trust that guy over Jon? Yeah, so like in the moment and given the information all the characters know, Robb is correct, but like given the reader's knowledge, Catelyn is correct. It's such a weird, interesting moment that I love that George does. Sorry, guys, I'm kind of getting over a cold and my voice is starting to go. Ned had aspects of imposter syndrome after his father and brother's deaths. I feel like Jon would be much the same if he was just voted as king rather than having Robb's direct blessing on the matter. I would agree with that, Josh. I agree. I think if Jon becomes a Stark Lord of Winterfell post-resurrection, we will lose him as a POV character, a bit like how we lost Cat as a POV after. Yeah, I agree, Jack. Like, this is something I have talked about quite a lot. I really enjoy that. Like, some people were wondering like why I didn't put Jon in my top 10 POVs, and it's because I am not certain Jon is going to be a POV, right? Like, if he is, then yeah, he'd be in my top 10, but I am not sure he's going to be. Could Stoneheart intercept the will? So this is interesting. if the will is actually at Seaguard, she could. But if the will is already in the neck, which again, it would have been on its way before the Red Wedding even happened, probably. What if it turns out that Robb's will was accidentally dropped to the water, and people who saw the will try to say something like, King Robb has said this, trust me, bro. Yeah, I mean, that's possible, right? Like, that is possible. I think the problem with that, though, is given how many people there are. Like, if it was just Stoneheart, if it was just maybe this person or that, maybe. But I think because of the characters of all of these people that we have, I don't think that's going to happen. I agree, Josh. I agree. I mean, here's the thing, though, Ghost. Robert Aaron still actually, like, has, like, a legit claim. Like, he does. Like, they are related. But yeah, it is one of those, like, weird ones. I don't think they're ever actually named in the story. You think the Freys have Robb's will? But my thing, so Jesse, though, my thing, if the Freys have Robb's will, they would have burned it. Like, they would have just burned it. I don't understand why they would, like, keep it. Like, it's not, it'd be bad for them to keep it. What if George watched your videos and makes Jon as the only POV? I mean, if he does, good on him. If that gets him to write, good on him. It'll be something. But yeah, about Jon's parentage, I actually would feel quite the opposite, right? Because I would actually enjoy seeing other people viewing Jon's actions. We get a little bit of a taste of this, right? Like, Samwell 1 in A Feast for Crows is quite literally this exact thing. Even, I guess, Sam's whole POV after he leaves the wall is literally this. Jon makes some decisions that seem kind of questionable, right? Splitting Gilly from her baby. Having Maester Aemon go on this journey that was bound to kill him. Like, these are all decisions that Sam has to rationalize and kind of understand why Jon did it. And even then, he still feels very spiteful and angry towards Jon. Those are all things I really like. Right? I really like seeing Jon through other people's eyes because it's perfect foreshadowing as to why Jon eventually dies by the end of the next book. And my thing with Samwell is he is such a weird character in Feast because he's a character that I think is probably the weakest of the entire book. But it's weird because his chapter, his plot line starts good in the first chapter for the most part, and then he ends kind of strong with a big reveal at the end. But everything in between is just kind of, it's not great. If George watches my videos, by the way, and he's definitely going to make Ned and Ashara Jon's parents just to make me mad. He's going to get me back. He's going to get me back. But that is going to be the stream, guys. I hope you guys all enjoyed. Thank you for, sticking with me on a different stream format just because it'll help me with some of the videos going forward. But, yeah, so thank you guys all for watching.